Hi, and welcome to Building Fundraising Capacity, Creating an Effective Fundraising Program for Your Nonprofit Organization. My name is Maureen Mahoney Hill. I am founder and principal of Advancement Advisors, a fundraising consulting and coaching firm based in Pittsburgh. And I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about building your fundraising capacity. I wanted to start out with just reviewing what our objectives are in this video today. What we hope to accomplish. We want to understand and appreciate the basics of fundraising, including the importance of investing in infrastructure to support and sustain fundraising efforts. We will provide an overview of the basics and then move quickly into strategies for building sustainability into your fundraising efforts. We also want to learn the value and process of planning in successful fundraising and recognize the opportunity of individual giving. We want to learn to engage board members more effectively in fundraising, focusing on training tools and techniques to empower your board, and learn about how a culture of philanthropy can build capacity and sustainability into your fundraising efforts. It builds resiliency needed when new challenges arise. So we wanted to start with the very basics in fundraising and looking at the 4 steps in the fundraising process: identification, engagement or cultivation, ask or solicit, and thank or steward. Identification is finding potential donors who have the capacity and inclination to support your organization. As an organization, we have the ability to grow inclination, but really no control over capacity, although we can suggest giving options that may open up capacity for larger gifts. That's something called smart giving that hopefully we can talk about in a future video. Engagement or cultivation, these are specific strategies to raise awareness and grow inclination of identified potential donors towards supporting your organization. These are things like volunteering, communications, tours or events, personal contact. Ask or solicitation, this is exactly what you think it is. Specific strategies to ask your potential supporters to make a financial investment in your organization. And then finally, thank or steward. These are specific strategies designed to acknowledge, appreciate, and retain donors and their inclination to support your organization. It starts with a thank you and recognition process, but continues with many of the same strategies we would utilize during the cultivation or engagement stage. The goal of stewardship is donor retention. It's much more effective to retain existing donors than it is to identify and solicit new ones. And then it is a cycle, so it all begins again with identification, engagement, ask, and thank. I like to show the same information in this different version, the same vision of the fundraising cycle. It really demonstrates how small the actual ask part of the process is. And this is the process that most people are either uncomfortable with or afraid of, but it is the smallest part of the process, and it is essential. So as we talk more about being more engaged in the fundraising process, I want you to remember that there's lots and lots of opportunities for board members, your staff, other volunteers to be engaged in fundraising as ambassadors, advocates, and stewards by helping with identification, engagement, and thanking without ever having to ask for a gift. But we need to remember we always do have to make that ask. Here we're talking about the essential elements for a fundraising program. We want to start with concrete fundraising goals. It's important that you set measurable and actionable objectives to meet those goals. You have to be working towards a goal, otherwise, how will you know that you're successful? You need to have a plan of action in place, and that plan of action should cover the steps of identification and solicitation in that fundraising cycle we just reviewed. Here you're going to outline strategies, techniques, audiences, and assign responsibility. Who is going to be held accountable for each of the steps in the plan of action? You need to have a donor database. And this is where you actually cover the identification phase in that cycle. But actually, every phase in the fundraising cycle should be tracked in your donor database. This is where you record and track donor behaviors to gain fundraising insight, and monitor your results. You need to have a communication and marketing plan as well. This covers that cultivation and some stewardship in the fundraising cycle. This is getting the word out through communications, fundraising, events, volunteering. And then finally, that donor stewardship effort, where you're thanking and recognizing and continuing to engage your supporters. We want to start with fundraising goals. This is really the first thing you tackle with your fundraising when you're working on your fundraising plan. And the thing you need to look at is your fundraising results from the previous year. Your goals need to be based not only on what the need is in your organization, but also the realistic capacity of your organization and your past success. And this is information gleaned from your existing data. Again, the importance of that CRM or donor database. You want to pull results from each of your past strategies, because without data, you're just making plans based on conjecture. Financial goals must be measurable. We must keep track and report on those goals regularly or quarterly to your development committee. And again, the importance of your CRM or database. There was a study recently done of fundraisers and board members where they were asked how they set their fundraising goals. 50% said they based them on the organization's needs and priorities. This is good, 50%. There was a 27% of those said that they based it on a percentage increase over the last year. That's an okay strategy if you know how you're going to accomplish that increase. 23% said we're going to base our goals on what we need to balance the budget. This is a scary way to set your fundraising goals. And 13% said they plan to just raise as much as possible. Again, not a good strategy. We want you to think about setting your fundraising goals using a SMART fundraising goal strategy. The SMART method helps to define your goals so that you can work towards them effectively, and applying elements of these to your fundraising goals can give direction and focus to your efforts. We want to make sure your goals are specific. Things like, we're going to raise $10,000. We're going to gain 400 new donors. We're going to raise 20% more in total donations compared to last year. We're going to increase donor retention by 2%, or recruit 10 new volunteers to be engaged in our fundraising strategy. We want to make sure these are also measurable. These examples I just provided are pretty easy to answer the question, how much or how many? $10,000, we just track the money raised. 400 new donors, we just track the number of new donors compared to the previous year. Raised 20% more in total donations, again, tracking the money raised. We also want those goals to be achievable, but I'm going to encourage you to think about making those goals ambitious. Research shows that difficult goals result in greater performance. Think about what your proudest accomplishments are. Most people derive the greater pleasure and satisfaction from achievements they had to work hard for. This is why most fundraising organizations have such ambitious and large capital campaign fundraising goals. Keep in mind about that setting goals that are too difficult can also work against you. Fundraising goals need to be challenging, but not impossible. So if your organization is already raising, let's say, $8,000, creating a goal of raising $10,000 is not impossible, and depending on your organization, may be achievable and may be ambitious. If you're currently raising $2,000 and you're trying to raise $10,000, but you don't have the capacity to do that, that may be an impossible goal. Wouldn't be a goal I would suggest you create. We want to make sure your goals are also relevant. We value achievements that make a positive difference. So you should know the why behind your fundraising goals. Much like donors who need to know the impact their gift will have, fundraisers need to be reminded about the work that their development goals support. You should know how your fundraising goal relates to your mission. So that $10,000 goal, maybe that means we can feed 5,000 more people from the food bank, or help 10,000 more pets if we're able to in our shelter. So we need to go back and understand what the why is of what we're doing and our goals. And finally, we need to make sure that our goals are time-based. If a goal isn't time-based, it can be put off indefinitely. A visible deadline is a powerful motivator both for donors and for fundraisers. So for that $10,000 goal, let's say our goal is to reach $10,000 so we can feed X more people from the food bank, and we need to do that by October 1st. While we list the financial goals first when we're creating a fundraising plan, we actually develop them last. Why? We have to carefully construct the goals so that the goals are fully backed up with a plan on how we will get there. The goals should be the sum of all the specific strategies outlined in your fundraising plan. In addition to your financial goals in your fundraising plan, we also encourage you to think about strategic goals. And these would be non-monetary goals that will have an impact on the success of your plan and your fundraising effort. These are things like creating a case for support, building a culture of philanthropy, infrastructure needs like replacing or updating your donor CRM or software, staff training, board training, redoing your marketing materials, updating policies and procedures. All of these things have a very significant impact on your fundraising success, but not necessarily on those financial goals. A good fundraising plan is a roadmap to success, detailing how you allocate your limited resources of time and money. It keeps you out of crisis mode and helps you control the flow of work in your office. A written plan should contain the who, the what, the when, and how much for each fundraising strategy and goal that you are working toward. Your plan should clearly state both your overall and your specific fundraising goals, along with potential sources of donors and strategies to reach those donors. And it should include an implementation plan or timeline with the action steps needed to make it happen. So let's look specifically at the questions your plan, your fundraising plan, should answer. How much money do you need to raise? We talked about this a little bit already when we talked about those SMART goals, but you need to have a specific goal for your plan. If you're just trying to raise more money, you're setting yourself up for failure. What are your organization's needs, and connecting those needs and potentially connecting those needs to what your strategic plan says? What can you accomplish with a specific amount of money? Where will the money come from? Every organization needs a mix of revenue streams to ensure fiscal health and stability. Will you be raising money from individuals? Well, I hope so, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Foundation and corporate support, government grants and events. Don't set a goal without knowing the specific source of the revenue. And don't try to raise all the money from one source. If all your revenue comes from one grant, one government source, or one special event, you are flirting with disaster. If something happens to that one revenue stream, you'll find yourself struggling to keep the door open and your staff paid. Who will you ask? And here I really need you to be specific. Who will you ask for the money? Create a list of potential donors to ask, or list of potential foundation funders or corporate supporters. Target donors with specific requests based on your understanding and research of their interests. Avoid the ready, fire, aim temptation, or what we call spray and pray. When the sense of urgency translates into getting started and soliciting a bunch of people, or as many people as possible, without really a plan. Fundraising without a plan, organization, and discipline is really an invitation to failure, or at best, leaving money on the table. Focus on your current donors. There's that donor retention idea. Lapsed donors and warm prospects with the asks. And don't forget to include in your plan ways to identify and attract new donors into your donor base. When will you ask? Let me be clear, a calendar of activities is not a fundraising plan, but a calendar of activities is an important part of a comprehensive fundraising plan, as it provides a complete picture of your year, both in terms of your workload, but perhaps more importantly, from a donor perspective, it enables you to see your touches with your donors when you're asking, thanking, or just communicating with them. And you should be spending time and resources on all three of those things in your plan. How much will you ask for? As much as possible, identify a target ask for each donor or each segment of your donors. Do the research and tie asks to concrete needs in your organization. We call that asks with purpose. And finally, how will you follow up on a gift? Your fundraising plan is not just about asking. Include in your plan how you will thank donors and steward their gifts, how you will build relationships with them. Remember to include acknowledgments, recognition, and stewardship in your plan, calendar, and budget. Donor retention, I'm going to say that word many times today. Data shows that if you can improve your donor retention by just 10%, the lifetime value of your donor base improves by 200%. And as we've already said, having a plan keeps you out of crisis mode when you plan the work and work the plan. It helps control the flow of work in your office and prevents you and your team from getting overcommitted. Time your major fundraising strategies so that they don't overlap with each other, planning ahead so that each strategy can get done with excellence and without crisis. Otherwise, havoc will reign in your office. This one is particularly important, especially for smaller or new nonprofit organizations. We need to shift from being reactive to proactive in our fundraising efforts. You don't have to be reacting all of the time. You need to be proactive. You can initiate deliberate strategies involving carefully thought out steps and that you have the time to follow and at least consider best practices instead of rushing around and hoping for the best. Having a plan also helps build confidence. When people above you, your executive team and board, have confidence in you and your plan because they have worked with you on developing it, they will work with you to accomplish the identified goals. Otherwise, they're likely to meddle with your plan and program and potentially measure you with ineffective metrics. And finally, over and over again, the data shows having a plan will help you raise more money. What other reason do you, your leadership, or your board need to allocate the time and resources to creating a fundraising plan? So let's focus on what should be included in your fundraising plan. I got this template from the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and it's where we always start in our work with clients. The plan doesn't always end up looking like this, but I like this template because it covers all of the important components that need to be incorporated into an effective fundraising plan. We already talked about financial goals. We already talked about strategic goals. So let's move into talking about fundraising strategies for reaching those goals. The most effective fundraising solicitation strategies have to be targeted and organized. Remember, we're working to avoid that ready, fire, aim approach, but at the same time, we have to remember that you don't get if you don't ask. So we need to make sure we are asking. Included in your fundraising plan should be strategies that include personal solicitations. This is the face-to-face ask, visits, phone calls, emails, and letters that are personalized and targeted. They should be going to your board, your major donors, your plan giving donors, and your mid-level donors. Direct mail or multi-channel strategies enable you to reach a wider audience, but have a lower return on investment, but are an important way to engage entry-level donors to support your organization and hopefully move them up the levels of giving. Digital fundraising strategies are becoming more and more common. among all ages of donors. This is email, social media, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer, video, text messaging. We have to remember that our younger donors are digital natives. They expect the first communication and outreach from you to be digital. So what are you including in your fundraising plan for them? Grants would be foundation grants, corporate support, government support, and then special events. This is money raised through ticket sales, sponsorships, event-associated fundraising such as auctions, souvenir sales, raffles. For each solicitation strategy that you include in your fundraising plan, you need to make sure you're identifying who is the responsible staff and volunteers who will be held accountable for this. What is the time frame? Who are the targeted prospects and donors? What are your financial goals? And what is the method, activities, tasks, strategies that will be used as part of that plan? I want to stop here for a minute and talk about when you're thinking about your solicitation strategies, I want you to be thinking about individual giving as your priority. By far, individual giving is the biggest piece of the pie. According to the Giving USA report, individual giving represents 67%, or about $375 billion of the $557 billion in charitable gifts made in this country annually. 67% are from individuals. If we add bequests, which is 8%, that takes individuals to 75% of all charitable gifts in this country. And I will note that the Giving USA data does not include gifts from IRAs or donor advised funds. So the amount of gifts from individuals is much higher than the 75%. We can compare this to the 19% that comes from foundations and the 7% that comes from corporations. So I want you to compare those statistics to your planned allocation of time, effort, and resources. Are you investing 75% of your time on getting support from individuals? Or is it closer to 50% or 25%? I really can't stress enough how important this is, especially for small or new nonprofit organizations. Individuals should be your priority in terms of long-term sustainability. Put simply, individual giving is where the money is. Individual giving is generally unrestricted dollars, and it can be used for operating expenses such as salaries. It is your favorite kind of money, no strings attached. Individual giving also provides an opportunity to build sustainability into your fundraising program. It enables you to acquire new donors and renew donor support, brings new people in, allows you to cultivate donors to increase giving levels. It allows you to broaden and diversify your fundraising base, and it builds donor loyalty. Again, that donor retention by providing increased opportunities for engagement. Also, it allows you to identify and involve leadership volunteers, creating a culture where everyone understands their role in the fundraising process. No matter how big or small your organization is, you can't do fundraising alone. You need your board, your executive leadership, your program staff, and volunteers to be actively engaged in the fundraising process with you. And finally, a solid individual giving program is required for a successful planned giving program. Planned giving is gifts from wills and estates, and it is the lowest cost, highest return gifts nonprofit organizations can generate. So why isn't individual giving 75% of your pie? Well, I'll tell you why, because it's easily ignored. Some people think I'm going to write a letter or two and that's all the individual giving I need to do. It is scarier and harder than corporate and foundation solicitation. There's no RFPs to respond to, no guidelines, no deadlines to meet. And it's just much more personal. You put yourself out there when you're asking an individual for a gift. It requires time and attention and budget to be successful. It needs to be strategic, not last minute. And it can't be what you do after everything else on your plate is finished. It needs to be consistent, not sporadic. It needs to build over time and move donors up the pyramid. Remember, individual giving is the greatest source of opportunity today and in the future. It is a long-term strategy worthy of time and resources. There was some interesting data that came from Blackbaud, a report called the Status of Canadian Fundraising Report, which really revealed stark differences between charities whose revenue was growing and charities whose revenue was in decline. Nonprofits experiencing income decline relied heavily on grants. Growing nonprofits received most of their income from major individual donors. Grants help fund programs, but they are not a growth strategy. To scale impact, you need strong relationships, flexible funding, and major individual donors who believe in your mission. So how can you add more individual giving to your fundraising plan? We know, and that research reinforces it, that being highly dependent on grants or special events is common for a lot of small nonprofits. And if your organization is new to fundraising, now is the perfect time to focus your energy and resources on individuals before you create a fundraising approach that's not sustainable. So here again, those magic words, donor retention. Donor retention works by engaging existing donors so that they will willingly continue to financially support you each year. Retention includes ongoing engagement strategies so each donor feels appreciated and valued. The annual average donor retention rate is around 43%, according to the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. This means that the average nonprofit organization loses more than half of their donors each year. Even worse, the recapture rate for lapsed donors is about 5%. So if a donor stops giving, there is an exceedingly small chance that they will give again. Intentional strategies around retaining current donors is imperative to the financial success of your organization. It can't be something that's an afterthought. Major donors and plan giving donors have the best return on investment in your fundraising plan, especially meeting individually, face-to-face, with your major donors and soliciting them in a personal way. You need to start with those who are closest to your organizations. These are the people who are your loyal donors, your board, your staff, and your volunteers. These are the individuals who are most committed to your organization. Are you intentionally asking them for their financial support? Are you asking them in a way that reflects their personal commitment to your mission or cause? Are you asking them each year for more? Are you asking for specific needs or purposes? Are you acknowledging, recognizing, and stewarding those gifts, donor retention? Are you leveraging those gifts? In a study of highly effective small nonprofit organizations, they found that every meeting with an individual major donor resulted in $5,000 on average. The more you meet with people, the more you will raise. Getting out there and meeting with donors and talking to them is critical. Create a plan and set a goal for meetings with individual donors. In that study, the average was only 17 meetings with donors per year. Could you do 24 to a month? I also want to encourage you to consider starting a very basic plan giving program. Remind your donors to include your organization in their will or estate plan, or name your organization as the beneficiary of their insurance, retirement plan, or donor advised fund. Ask them to let you know if they do so, and then steward them as your best, most important donors. What I like to say about starting a basic plan giving program is literally, you just want to hang the sign up that says, "We will gladly accept a gift in your will," and remind donors, your most committed donors, that this is an incredible way that they can make a very significant impact. I also want to make sure that you are encouraging your donors to consider making their gift a monthly or recurring gift. These are the bread and butter of every successful organization. It creates a more predictable revenue stream that will power your organization through uncertain times. It's a consistent source of monthly income that frees you up from planning your budget around seasonal giving and fluctuating revenue. Even more, it pulls donors into long-term investment in your work. Monthly or recurring donors are more likely to deepen their engagement over time, leading to higher renewal rates. Remember, we said average donor retention is about 43%. Monthly or recurring donors, retention is at 85%. That also leads to larger gifts and additional donations on top of their recurring gift, including planned gifts. The average monthly donation is $52 a month. That's $624 a year. We compare that to the average one-time gift, which is $128. We talked already a little bit about digital fundraising. This uses online fundraising techniques and applications to reach a larger audience and build greater relationships with your donor base in a more cost-effective and customized way. Digital fundraising is the ongoing process or strategy that may start with online outreach techniques, including websites, emails, and social media, and leads to increased engagement through electronic means. Finding new ways to fundraise through digital technology, identifying digital tools for better connecting with our stakeholders, and creating a digital strategy are some of the strategies we need to focus on. Why? It makes interaction, engagement, and stewardship easier, raises more awareness, improves retention, and reduces workload and often increases donations. What are some of the examples of digital fundraising? According to current data, around 63% of website visits globally are from mobile devices, meaning that roughly 5 out of 8 website visits are made on a mobile phone or tablet. If it's not easy for donors to give while they are on their phones, now is the time to optimize your donation page and website for phones. We need to prioritize email and multi-channel campaigns. According to recent data from the Blackbaud Institute, online giving has seen a significant increase, with the percentage of charitable giving donated online increasing nearly 8% in 2022, 12% in 2023, representing a growth of over 50%. And here's the critical thing. Smaller organizations with revenue under $1 million saw the highest percentage of online donations, reaching almost 17%. Again, all the more reason to make sure you have your information available on your website and user-friendly for people's phones. Set up a branded donation page, launch a fundraising campaign, launch a Google ad campaign, get active on social media, create and share videos, enable recurring giving on your website, run a text to give campaign, build a segmented email list, offer gift matching options. These are all ways to engage more effectively with individual giving. We need to remember when we're working on our fundraising plan that it's also critically important to assign responsibility and budget. Everywhere along the way, when you're writing your fundraising plan, write people's names in as responsible. Goals, solicitation strategies, cultivation strategies, all should include names in the action plan or timeline as you create the plan. Make sure those people who are named are actively engaged in the development of the plan so they feel a sense of ownership. The only way things are going to get done if somebody is held accountable for them. We also need to make sure we are budgeting effectively for our fundraising plan. It's important to justify the expenses associated with fundraising so that the allocation of funds in your organizational budget will continue. It's important for board members, volunteers, and leadership to understand the costs associated with each strategy in the plan, along with the expected revenue. You need to calculate the potential return on investment, and that helps with future decision making. It costs money to raise money, so it needs to be included in your budget. Estimated expenses, project revenue, and timing, and both. I can tell you how many times I've worked with a nonprofit that I've asked them, well, what is your budget for fundraising? And they've told me zero. Even if you don't have outside expenses, you still have staff expenses. And it's important to understand and acknowledge that those costs are essential for you achieving the mission of your organization. We need to make sure that you have an effective donor management software, or CRM. What is a CRM? It's a software solution that nonprofit professionals use to assess insights into their supporters' engagement histories, track key fundraising metrics, and measure success. When organizations invest in the right donor management tools and use them properly, they can become an incredible asset. Why is this important? CRMs do three really important things. They centralize your data and give you the ability to personalize outreach, and then they generate reports for measurement and evaluation, all critical elements for your fundraising plan. For data, think about all the interactions you have with your donors: emails, events, phone calls, mailings. Donor database software provides a central location where staff can store and access that information and then use it when they're thinking about their future fundraising plans. A good CRM also allows you to personalize your donor outreach. For example, suppose you know that a supporter has attended many of your events in the past. You may decide to send a personalized invitation or an invitation with a handwritten note to acknowledge their past attendance. They'll feel seen and acknowledged because you understand how much that particular supporter enjoys that event. It also allows you to report information. Your database stores and generates reports on essential donor trends and patterns. Why invest in a CRM? The CRM allows you to take a closer look at which strategies are most effective and which aspects of your fundraising efforts need to be improved or done away with. You can use this information to improve your fundraising return on investment by focusing your efforts on the most engaged supporters and reaching out to them with targeted messages. A donor database takes your nonprofit's fundraising to the next level, ensuring that you can manage and grow supporter relationships effectively and sustainably over time. So let's turn to cultivation and communication. The purpose of cultivation is to bring new prospects into your donor base and develop them as active supporters and regular donors. It also allows you to improve relationships with existing donors to encourage continuing and greater investment. And finally, it improves greater awareness in the community and positions your organization in the greater community. Examples of cultivation strategies are simply your thank you letters and your acknowledgement procedures, donor recognition, communication and marketing tools, your website, your newsletter, your brochures, open houses, tours, awareness receptions, speakers or speaker bureaus, publicity and media placements, personal visits with top donors, providing access or annual meeting with your CEO or presidential chats, volunteering, hands-on engagement, paint the shelter, plant the trees, clean the church. Cultivation is how we engage donors more effectively in your mission. And then finally, stewardship. Stewardship are the specific strategies designed to acknowledge, appreciate, and retain donors and their inclination to support your organization. It starts with the thank you and recognition, but as I said earlier, continues with some of those same strategies we talked about in cultivation, but with no ask. It's important that there is communication with your donors that does not include solicitation. The dictionary definition of stewardship is the act or activity of looking after, the duty or function of watching or guarding. Synonyms listed in the dictionary include guidance, care, guardianship, trust, protection, shepherding. According to the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, the total overall retention rate, which we already talked about, was about 43%. We know that donor acquisition is expensive. With about 60% of your donors only giving once, this leaves nonprofits with a loss on their initial investment in first-time donors. This is even more important as we continue to face uncertainty in the economy. All nonprofits need to dedicate more time to understanding what their donors want. To succeed at donor retention, we need a strategy as well as a way to measure success. So how would you track donor retention? It is easier and much more cost-effective to motivate individuals to give if they've already done so in the past, and fundraising technology is making it easier than ever to optimize stewardship techniques and improve donor experiences. So take advantage of your CRM. Fundraising platforms can help identify donor trends, schedule and plan campaigns. We want you to work smarter, not necessarily harder, and not more complicated by implementing technology. We need to look at what the donor experience is with your nonprofit organization. Seek feedback from your donors and incorporate that into your fundraising plan. Do you do a survey, focus groups, meet personally with your donors? Sometimes just asking is more important than the answers that you'll get. And this is also the same with invitations to events. Sometimes just inviting someone is more important than them actually attending. Learn more about how your donors want to be communicated with, what they want to hear about from you, how they prefer to give. Again, utilizing your database or CRM, use information to personalize content and messages. Consider using a welcome series of emails for new donors and new subscribers. Data shows that 59% of donors would give more for a more personalized experience. And 60% of donors value a personalized experience compared to 44% who report being satisfied with the personalization they receive. We want to make sure you're sharing stories of impact. 76% of donors are looking for information on impact before they make a donation. Nonprofits exist to solve problems, so it's very important that we showcase the impact of the work we're doing. This leads to more meaningful relationships with their donors. We report back to foundations and to the government. Why don't we report back to our individual donors, to our major donors, to all of our donors? A study done by Planned Parenthood where they sent a stewardship piece out before an appeal, simply thanking the donor and sharing the impact of their gift. Recipients of that email gave $45 more on average than those who didn't get that email. That's a 67% increase in giving just by sharing impact. So let's look at building sustainability into your fundraising program and into your fundraising plan. We want to make sure you're creating a plan that's based on existing resources. When planning for fundraising, it's important to create a program that is achievable within your existing resources of staff, time, budget, and organizational culture. The only way your fundraising will be successful is if it's crafted within the capacity and capabilities of your organization right now. Not what you want it to be, but where you are right now. It's also important that strategies match your organizational culture. Otherwise, they will not be effective or sustainable. We want to make sure you're also focusing on consistency. Pick what you can do and then do it very, very well. Then do it consistently so that giving becomes a habit, a tradition. We know that consistency builds trust. All donor relationships are built on trust. We want you to start small, grow organically, don't overreach because that causes burnout. Pick what you can do and then do it really well. We want you also to leverage opportunities, existing opportunities. If you have an anniversary, there's a national day or month for your cause or mission, or an existing event that you already have, use larger gifts or grants as matching or challenge grants. Can you leverage that for a bigger fundraising impact for your organization without expanding too much in additional resources? And then finally, we want you to focus on strategies with the highest return on investment. We know that individual giving, major gifts, and planned gifts have a much higher return on investment than direct mail and special events. In order for your fundraising to be successful, it is essential that all those involved understand their role in the process. This is particularly important for your board members. Some may get overly involved, becoming micromanagers or derailing efforts with new ideas borrowed from other very dissimilar organizations, while others may be more hands-off, saying they can't or don't want to ask people for money. To ensure that everyone understands and embraces their role in fundraising as an organization with a true culture of philanthropy, you will need to have a board job description. It starts when you are recruiting new board members. It's essential that you can answer the question, what do you want your board members to do for your organization? Take the time to develop a job description or expectations document that outlines exactly what you expect from board members in terms of time commitment, meeting and event attendance, level of involvement, and fundraising activities. Vague statements like play an active role in fundraising will leave expectations up to the imagination and likely lead to you not receiving the fundraising support you need. In your job description, specify the level of gift you want from board members to make, as well as the type of fundraising activities you'd like them to do. This description can be tailored based on their availability and comfort level. It's not one size fits all. The point is to be as clear as possible when describing the fundraising role you need your board members to play. When you're recruiting, we want you to start with your current board members and their networks, but also look at your donor base and identify a few consistent and or major donors who could be good candidates for board membership or could introduce you to somebody who might be. Professional fundraisers may not be the best candidates to improve fundraising for your board. Frequently, they have restrictions on how much fundraising they can do outside of their paid positions. And also, they may not want to fundraise outside of their job. Passion and commitment to the mission of your organization, willingness to learn, not being afraid to ask are really the best qualities to look for. And how about trying before you buy? Think about an advisory board, a circle of friends, leadership council, even your development committee, if you're allowed to have non-board members, can be opportunities to engage volunteers and as a pipeline for future board membership. We want to also make sure you're doing appropriate orientation and training of your board. This should include an organizational overview, fundraising overview, and provide ongoing training for the full board. How often should you do that? We have some clients that include 10 minutes of fundraising exercise at the beginning of every board meeting. Others that do it once a year, others that do it whenever they have a board retreat. But role plays, exercises, guest speakers, it is the role of the development committee to plan and implement and monitor that training. So that leads us to the development committee. It's important to know that the development committee's role is not simply to raise money. The development committee is responsible for overseeing the organization's overall fundraising and carrying out the board's due diligence function related to ensuring fiscal health through philanthropy. The committee partners with staff to institutionalize the fundraising process, create a culture of philanthropy within the board and its individual members, assuring a donor-centered organization. So this development committee is responsible for fundraising policies and procedures, the culture of philanthropy. It's responsible for training. It works with staff to develop the fundraising plan, strategy, and goals. Looks at that ROI compared to plan, helps articulate the case for support for your organization, establishes task forces to carry out specific fundraising activities, and then does personalized follow-up with individual board members to monitor their process in fundraising. The development committee also has the job of bringing fundraising to the board for discussion and voting. Fundraising needs to be an agenda item at every board meeting, not just an update on fundraising goals. Focusing only on the dollar raised encourages board members to only consider transactional fundraising. With donors asking and giving, we need to shift the conversation to a more donor-centered approach. We need to look at metrics such as that donor retention, giving levels, donor engagement, board giving, and testimonials, and provide opportunities for board members to be more engaged in the fundraising process. And then finally, we want to measure performance. We want to measure progress and encourage the governance committee to have each board member complete an annual self-evaluation and review those results as a group. If improvements are needed, ask board members what they need in terms of resources and staff support to do a better job. It's important to be comfortable with the idea of bless and release board members and using this self-evaluation to learn what's behind the lack of involvement, discuss expectations, and whether actually a board role is a good fit for that individual. This is the importance of term limits. Perhaps the most important thing for fundraisers can do to build resiliency in their fundraising program is to foster an organization-wide culture of philanthropy, so where everyone understands and values their role in the fundraising process. Successful fundraising takes the commitment of the entire organization, not just the fundraising team. This is even more essential in challenging times. Engage your entire team, your fundraising staff, your board, your development committee, volunteers, executive leadership, program staff in the planning process to create a sense of ownership. When you mobilize the entire staff and board in the process, your fundraising capacity increases dramatically. I always like to say the best fundraiser in the organization is the person who answers the phone. There are 4 core components of creating a culture of philanthropy at your organization, and one is that shared responsibility for fundraising. 2 is make sure that your fundraising is integrated and aligned with mission. Fund development needs to be valued and mission-aligned component of the organization's overall work, rather than a standalone function. We need to focus on fundraising as engagement and building strong donor relationships. Donors are seen as authentic partners in our work, not simply as targets or dollar signs. So we're focusing on fundraising as relationship building versus transaction. If you don't have a strong culture of philanthropy in your organization, then what goals, strategies, and activities are you going to work into your plan to make sure one starts to grow so that you are prepared no matter what comes next? Thank you for listening today. I hope this video inspired you to think more strategically about your fundraising efforts.